So once again, we're back, and it's time for part two of the end of year review. Which the first part, as you can probably guess, was about the big three console manufacturers: Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo. Part two is the third parties. Now, there's no other way I can put this, so let's get into it after the cut. Okay then, let's get into it. So basically, we can reasonably say that aside from Ubisoft, no one really had a good year this year, third party wise. Yeah, they may have made money, but a lot of their stuff has blown back on them. So in the case of, say, EA and Activision, things have not been good. And we can say that with absolute confidence. So basically, let's start with EA. EA started the year on a bad foot. Their big game that they released at the beginning of the year was Mass Effect Andromeda. Mass Effect Andromeda was a dumpster fire, okay? A dumpster fire of dirty diapers and tires doused in castor oil and then lit on fire. Yeah, it stunk to high heaven. But wait, it gets worse. Throughout the year, EA just continuously, things just kind of went downhill more and more. Culminating with the end of this year, where their big holiday game, Star Wars The Force Awakens, Star Wars Battlefront 2, culminated a shitstorm of people who are against loot boxes. Even people like, yeah, we're going to legislate against loot boxes. Now, certain people in my peer group in the Google Plus and YouTube gamosphere think that that's a bad thing. Personally, I think that, if you have to resort to shady business practices in order to turn a profit, you should be regulated out of doing that. But that's my own personal opinion. Let's move on to Activision. I'm lumping these three together because I don't want to waste a segment each, because they all are guilty of basically the same thing, except for Ubisoft. Ubisoft had a relatively good year. So, basically, Activision got caught with their hand in the cookie jar twice with Destiny. Now, Destiny was essentially Destiny 2 basically came out, and it was not doing what, they finally brought this game to PC, and from what I've heard, the PC version of Destiny 2 is head and shoulders above the console version. But that's aside from the point. It was shown that Activision basically patented an algorithm that would basically pit low-level players against high-level players, thereby forcing the low-level players to spend money to keep up with the high-level players. Then they were caught with the new DLC for Destiny, basically giving people the shaft, if you will, with, the DLC, locking content that was open to the base game people behind DLC after the fact, which is so much bullshit, it's not even funny. But I'll save Activision next. Activision just kind of sorry, not Activision, Ubisoft. Ubisoft actually has had a relatively good year. I say relatively though, because, it's not 100%. It's just relative compared to everyone else. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Origins is a broken piece of shit, but no one's really gotten on them about that. Far Cry 5, I don't know if it's come out yet. Maybe, I don't know. That's looking good. A lot of people are enjoying the shit out of Rabbids Cross Mario. a tactical RPG type game for the Switch. So, I mean, I'll give Ubisoft a solid B. So, you know, EA gets 45 because they've been fucking up all year. Activision gets a 70, and Ubisoft gets an 85. I'll give you my total scores for them after the cut. Alright then, so basically we can say that the overall score of the third parties of EA, Activision, and Ubisoft this year, EA getting a dismal 45%, Activision getting a 70, and Ubisoft getting an 85. I think I elaborated as to why they got those scores for me. You know, if you add those three scores together, they equal 210. Divide them by 3, you get 70%. So for the big third parties this year, I mean, they kind of essentially aren't doing too well. Now you might ask, well, why didn't I include 2K or Nordic, THQ Nordic, or Deep Silver? I mean, you know, Deep Silver had one game come out this year, one big quote-unquote AAA game come out this year. That game flopped. It wasn't a terrible game, but it wasn't the game that they needed to make that would basically get people back into their titles. So, I mean, you know, boo-hoo for them. But let's talk about the other third parties. You know, the other quote-unquote big third parties. Let's look at 2K. 2K has not been having the greatest year either. You know, they haven't gotten the backlash of say EA and Activision, but they've been fucking up too. Because I mean, let's look at the the travesty that is NBA 2K18 and WWE 2K18. These games are microtransaction messes. You know, GTA Online is a goddamn, you know, it finally got some new content, but it's not really doing that much, in my opinion. Now, of course, because first of all, it's online, it's GTA Online content, not single player content. So for me, that, you know, that isn't really, you know, that isn't the height of, man, they've really been looking after their consumers. So, I mean, you know, if you want to give 2K a score, which I will, I'll say it's a 75. Not the worst, but not the best. You know, that's a D, solid D. I mean, let's look at the Japanese third parties. Namco Bandai has had a 50-50 year. I mean, I've said this before about Namco Bandai. They're always about, or Bandai Namco, or Namdai, or Bamco, however you want to say their name. Namco Bandai is always 50-50 for me. 50% of the time they do their job, and 50% of the time they're fucking up. So it's like, you know, it's kind of a wishy-washy. So if I had to give them a score, I would give them an 80. That's a C. You know, that's a mid-grade C. They're not great. They're not terrible. They're kind of in the middle of the road. Capcom, oh boy, Capcom is going to get a, in my opinion, you know, I'm going to give Capcom a 70. All right, because they've been fucking up all year long, but I will give them credit. They haven't abandoned Street Fighter V or Marvel vs. Capcom. You know, they've been trying. They've been half-assed trying, but there has been some trying. It's half-assed, but trying nonetheless. So I'll give them a solid 70. As far as Konami's concerned, they are a non-concern. I'm not even going to talk about them. Sega, let's give Sega let's give Sega an 80 as well, because, you know, they've been trying. It hasn't been great, but they've been trying. You know, you know, you can't get angry at someone who tries. So, Namco Bandai 80, Capcom 70, and Sega an 80. So, I'll give you my scores after the cut. Alright then, so let's do our final tally for the quote-unquote big third parties of the year. I'm including 2K as their own separate score, since 2K basically, I mean, I know they're an American company, but they have a huge market in Europe too, you know, and I'm looking at these strictly as their American, you know, their biggest, how they're doing in their biggest market. So basically we have, for Japanese third parties, the big Japanese third parties, Namco, Bandai, Capcom, and Sega, we've got an 80 for Namco Bandai, a 70 for Capcom, and an 80 for Sega. So overall, that is 230 divided by 3 equals 76 points. 0.66666 ad infinitum, and for us, that simply means we're going to round that up to 77. So basically, overall, we can say that the American Big Three third parties got a 70. And we're going to add the 70 of 2K, and we're going to add the Japanese third parties, which we rounded that up to 77 because, you know, that's going to equal 217 if you add all that together. And overall, if you divide that by 3, we get a 72.222 ad infinitum, but we're just going to say 72, round that down to 72 even. So basically, that's a little bit over a D. So I guess to me, you know, adding this up numerically, I mean, third parties haven't been crushing it this year, per se. And I don't think they can turn it around in the last few weeks of December. So yeah, this hasn't been the greatest year on record for third-party gaming. So with that being said, I'll give you the, we'll talk about the last and final thing, which is indies after the cut, or in part 3.